Welcome to Healing Horizons with Sima. Today I'm joined by our luminous guest, Dr. Aimee Duffy, who is a leading voice in functional and integrative medicine, who is redefining how women understand their health, energy, and emotional well being. She uncovers what so many high achieving women overlook that exhaustion isn't a personality flaw and burnout isn't a badge of honor. Often, it's a hormonal imbalance silently sabotaging focus, mood, metabolism, and motivation. Her mission is powerful and clear that empowering women to reclaim vibrancy by healing the body from the inside out. So, let's step into a conversation that brings science, clarity, and hope to anyone feeling drained by the demands of modern life. So, Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
You're warmly welcome. I'm glad to have you here. So, Amy, let's start with, many women assume exhaustion is just part of being busy. So, can you share that what's the first red flag that fatigue may actually be rooted in hormones rather than lifestyle?
I think it's probably a combination to some degree of both. I think, what I often see is that most people generally know that um some of the major components of health is getting adequate sleep, is, eating healthy, whatever that might mean, but clearly means that eating, cheeseburgers and french fries and pizza and ice cream is not the path to health, right? So, I don't want to get caught up in what does actual healthy food mean, but we know what unhealthy food is. And then they know generally that moving more is a good thing. And what happens is that especially for women particularly who tend to um carry a lot on the outside, particularly from just dealing with life, right? So if you're a professional woman who's working outside the home, or if you're a busy mom that's working inside the home, your job never ends. So you've got things coming at you all the time, and I think women naturally tend to, I have teenage kids. I have four girls, and even though they're not physically here, and they're, my youngest is now 16, so she's driving herself, and so my child care uh life is very different now than it used to be, but a lot of it is up here now. So I wake up worrying about them. Are they okay? They're not cuddling with me anymore, so I don't have the connection I used to have. Do they feel neglected? Are they eating healthy? Are they doing all the right things? And so I think, um, when we have little kids, of course, there's a lot of, um, physical connection that's going on, and all the work that goes into maintaining the health and safety of your kids, and the happiness of your kids, as well as, the nutrition of your kids, and your life, and whether you have OCD and you need your clean house, or whatever the case is. I mean, that those things for us tend to take priority, and for so many women what happens is those get put on the front burner, and the healthy lifestyle things get put on the back burner. So we survive with less sleep than what is typically healthy. We tend to run around and snack, and maybe eat things, that aren't as great for our body. They're not fuel for our body. They're things that we think, I just need something to grab on real quick, but it's not really optimizing, your body's status to be at its best place. And we might feel like we're moving a lot because we're running around, doing all these things. But when you look at it at the end of the day, we're not moving not only to burn calories necessarily, but movement is really important for clearing toxins from our body. And so if we're moving around, but then generally we're mostly sedentary, um, maybe driving in the car a lot if you're a mom that's, gotta take kids everywhere, that sort of stuff, or you're sitting at a desk because your job is a computer job. And so even if you might find a minute to get some exercise, throughout the day, whether it's, you get up early in the morning and do the boot camp workout, which I think is a big, strong potential for burnout, but that's just my opinion, or you're trying to get a workout, somewhere in between, but we're mostly sedentary the rest of the day, then we're not letting toxins go. We're not helping our neurotransmitters, which is like our serotonin, dopamine, that sort of stuff, to go. So to me, I guess that's a very long answer to your question, is can we really separate lifestyle from hormones, right? But um, what happens is that because those things take priority and our own, habits and lifestyle get less, then on top of that, we start to add hormone changes that are coming at us earlier. And I think that the stress that we start to experience, whether it's external or potential internal stressors, because our guts aren't happy if we're not eating, proper food and nutrition and taking care of ourselves, then that starts to affect our adrenals. And we get external stressors as well as internal stressors. And our job, our bodies are really smart, and their number one job is to protect us and keep us alive. And so cortisol or adrenaline, when our adrenals make adrenaline to help deal with stress, we need that to stay alive. And so if your stress is so big and your cortisol starts to come down, what will happen is that it will pull progesterone with it. And so women in their late 30s into their 40s, because of the stress of lifestyle and adrenal dysfunction, will start to see progesterone levels go down, and then they feel the hormone symptoms. So low progesterone starts to experience some night sweats, some fatigue, difficulty sleeping, weight changes for sure, moodiness. So you feel like you're PMSing all the time, very irritable, moody. Um, Irregular periods can happen. So whether they're more frequent, they're less frequent, they're heavier than they used to be. We can see some changes go on there. You start to see some skin stuff happening. Hair loss is very common with low progesterone. So we'll start to see that happen and people go, wait, I'm too young to be in menopause, right? I'm only 42, I'm only 44. How is this happening? So it's the lifestyle things that then start to change hormones in somebody who's before 50. If you've kind of barely hung on and took care of yourself or whatever the case is, and you made it to 50 and then your hormones crash, then we might start to see some major dysfunction as your hormones change just naturally because menopause happens. So does that make sense how we're sorting? It kind of depends on where you are in your life and what's going on as to which came first. Was it lifestyle or hormones or some combination of both for sure?
Firstly, thank you for explaining that so clearly, Amy. And it really shows that how easily, women can overlook symptoms that point to something deeper than just being busy. And hearing you describe that so clearly makes it like easier, I would say, to understand what our bodies might be trying to tell us. Now, on a similar note, like brain fog is something many women experience but rarely talk about. So, what's happening in the body when brain fog becomes persistent?
I think again what we're seeing is kind of this process of overwhelming stimulation, for lack of a better word. Is this like we've got so many things coming into our system, and I think so many people don't realize how much. I'm going to go back to gut health, nutrition, hormones play a role because there's a very significant gut brain connection that we know. So there's stimulation coming from our body that we may not be conscious of as a stressor, and then we've got the external stressors, and there's just this threshold where your brain goes, there's only so much I can intake, for a period of time. And so we really then sort of get into this. I use the term hibernation mode, whether we're talking about that for energy or we're talking about that for brain, is like your brain is going to go, I'm only going to really pay attention if it's about my survival. Outside of that, this doesn't really matter. And so we sort of start to get to this place where it's like we forget about the things that are for sure important in our daily lives, but aren't necessarily about survival. And so, we get to this place where we're not remembering things. We're kind of in this fog. We forget names. We forget we have to start having sticky notes everywhere, or lists or reminders on our phone to remember, because I think we're just getting so overstimulated. Um, and so brain fog happens, and physiologically, so I'm kind of explaining what happens physiologically. I'm going to go back to when cortisol levels go down. That puts us in hibernation mode, and our body turns into this focus, and we're not going to be paying attention. If you're on an adrenaline rush because a tiger's chasing you, you're not thinking about anything else except what's right in front of you, and is that tiger still right behind me? So, our ability to think very clearly gets left behind. And so adrenal dysfunction is a huge part of that. Low cortisol And then progesterone is very brain health protective. And so just like I said, as progesterone levels start to decline, whether it's early because of the adrenal stress that we're dealing with, or because it's a natural part of menopause, progesterone levels go down, then our brain is not as calm as it used to be. So progesterone is really important for the brain. And then we certainly, as we get into the 50s and we start to see estrogen levels decline, there's a direct connection between cognitive health and estrogen as well. So there's some estrogen receptors in our brain that don't like to be without estrogen, and we can start to see more issues with like dementia from that perspective when it comes to like memory loss and missing words and things like that.
That makes sense. And like the way you describe how stimulation moves through the body and how we often aren't fully conscious of it makes so much sense. It really highlights at how I would say that easily brain fog can, dismissed instead of understood as a real signal from the body, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really hard as you talk, I mean, you start thinking about all the things that I've described, right? Like to be able to go, you know, it's sort of a cumulative thing that happens sort of slowly over time. So it's not like yesterday I was normal and today my brain's not working because I ate this or I did this, right? So I use this analogy of a watering can. So if you have this watering can that you start to fill up, with water kind of slowly over time, at some point in time, the water is going to start spilling out the spout. And the water spilling out the spout is your symptom that you might be now conscious of, right? So whether it's brain fog, whether it's fatigue, whether it's weight gain, other hormone symptoms that we mentioned before. And so it's very easy to focus on that and not realize that there's multiple layers of water that have been filling up that bucket over time, and we have no reserve left. So when we're thinking about what are the things that we can do, is like how can we control some of the stressors, because we can't control the clock, sometimes we can't control the calendar, we can't control everything that's going on, but we can start to say what are these internal stressors maybe that are filling up my bucket. So that's where your food and sort of lifestyle medicine can come from, that if I can reduce some of the level of this water inside this watering can, then I'm going to buy myself some reserve, and then maybe those symptoms will be better. So it's really hard for some people to find one thing that is causing the symptom that they have, because generally it's going to be a combination of several things going on cumulatively that are now leading up to more significant symptoms.
That's an excellent example, Amy. It really illustrates the point really well. Now, you work deeply with thyroid and adrenal health. So, why are these systems, so often overlooked when women seek answers for burnout and weight changes?
I think for me, because I'm passionate about this, I seek it out, right? And I go, I want to learn more about this. And this was back in 2008 was the first conference I went to on bioidentical hormone, or natural hormone balancing, and was introduced to the idea of really looking at adrenal dysfunction beyond what we were, you know, maybe taught for a minute in medical school about something like Addison's disease or Cushing's disease, which are like, you know, very rare spectrums of adrenal disorders, right? But this idea of adrenal dysfunction, or we call it the HPA axis dysfunction, which is super fancy, but dealing with cortisol levels and stressors and things like that, it's not something that mainstream medicine teaches. And so if somebody, unfortunately, doctors these days, if they're primary care, they're OBGYNs and they're in a system, they are streamlined. I mean, they are required to see so many patients a day, so much activity going on. And then we've got these, requirements from insurance about all the different boxes that you have to check to get covered, to get insurance reimbursement for this office visit and whatnot, that, unfortunately they're super stressed out. And the last thing they're going to do is go, I need, unless they really, come to rock bottom and say, I need to do something different. And we do see that. I do a lot of teaching for practitioners who are getting out of that and into this world of integrative functional medicine and looking at hormones and things like that. So traditional medicine doesn't address adrenal fatigue. they may address thyroid, but they're not really addressing it unless it gets so bad that it's very obvious. So, if you have a really high TSH, it's very clear, okay, your thyroid's not working and we can replace it. But a lot of times if your TSH is sort of lingering in the, 3.5 or 3.8, 4, and on traditional testing, it still looks normal, and we can go into what that means, but they're just looking at go, okay, well, it's not your thyroid, where it could subtly be your thyroid, but it could be adrenal dysfunction leading to thyroid, or they're not. I have so many patients that go, my doctor won't test my hormones because I'm still cycling, and they're going to say they're all normal. And there is a big spectrum of what's within normal range versus, is this adequate? Are they balanced? What else is going on in this world? And so the physicians who really focus on it, like I do in integrative functional medicine, I mean, we're seeking that out. We're going to conferences, or we're watching webinars from labs that do this type of testing, that sort of thing, so that we're actively learning more about this adrenal dysfunction. And it's just, unfortunately, it's not part of the traditional medical education, so then it's not part of traditional medical treatment.
Mhm. It really highlights, like what you explained, like why so many women feel unheard or misdiagnosed, when thyroid and adrenal issues are involved. And the way you describe how the systems get overlooked makes it really easy to see how burnout and weight changes can be misunderstood for so long. Now, continuing with that, you emphasize that healing isn't about doing more, about optimizing the body's natural energy system. So, how do
Absolutely.
women shift from, pushing harder to listening deeper?
I think again it's multifactorial and it can be overwhelming. So what are some easy things, that we can start with? So, we can take a deep dive and throw what I call, throw everything but the kitchen sink, right? Where we can really deep dive into, what are your cortisol levels? What are your hormone levels? What's going on in your gut? What foods is your body being stressed by, that sort of thing. So, you can find a functional or integrative medicine doctor and go through that, and that's optimal, and kind of get some guidance there. But even if that's overwhelming, and you may not have time maybe to process that and think, but you can do little things like, can I move a little bit more? And that doesn't mean that you have to get up at 5 a.m. and go to the boot camp gym. It's just, can I get some steps in? Can I do some yoga? Breathing. I mean, I think, you imagine somebody who's just waking up to the alarm clock, and it's like, get up and go from the time that you wake up until the time that you go to bed. You're go, 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 and you're just kind of like, you're in this survival mode, and you never really stop and take a big deep breath. So if you can pause and try to find some times where you can take some bigger breath. If you can spend some time in the sunshine. So as much as I can, I want to be outside. And so I do have a home office where I can be when I'm working, or if it's pouring down rain or something out here. But the more that you can be outside, the better you can. So, get some of that sunshine, get outside. Sleep is so important, and people really, really, really don't prioritize it, so, we put the
Mhm.
kids to bed if that's where your busy life is, and then you're on Facebook, or you're, watching TV, spending time with your spouse, which is important too, I guess. I'm not saying that it's not, but if you have to wake up early, then you've got to go to bed early. And our bodies do not function on constant, 4 hours, 5 hours, even 6 hours of sleep, like, and you really don't ever catch up. So a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't get enough sleep during the week, but then I sleep in on the weekends or whatever." If you have little kids, you never get to sleep in, right? So making sleep more of a priority is really important, if you're in a situation where you can do that. Um, and then you might go, "I'm trying to sleep, but I can't sleep," so that's where we get the adrenal stuff going on, where we're tired and wired. So we're running around exhausted all day, but then when it's actually time to sleep, we can't sleep. So there's some things that we can work on from there. And then from a food perspective, when you look at something that's in your hand, you're going to go, is this going to fuel my body and give it the energy that it needs, or is this going to cause more stress on my system? And what I mean by that is that you might go, okay, well, this caffeinated beverage is going to give me some energy for a short period of time, but because it's processed, because it's chemicals, your body's going to have to work hard to do something about that. So it may give you a period of energy because it's got sugar and caffeine in it, But the long-term effects is that that's a stressor on your system and that's going to cause more fatigue later. So, trying to eat foods that are natural, fruits, vegetables, protein sources, that sort of thing, and really try to stay away from things that are, full of chemicals. We call them processed foods, but that's because they're full of chemicals, right? So the more chemicals we put in our system, the more we're going to find, that our body has to work hard to deal with that. So those are, I'm not gonna say they're easy, but those are things that you can do without having to go find a doctor and, pay money and do all these tests. Like, these are things that you can do at home and start to kind of pay attention to. If I can eliminate some of those chemicals or pay a little bit more attention to if I'm putting a food in my body and it's causing, you know, a symptom, and so many people look at it and go, the only symptom they recognize is if it's a gut symptom, right? So I eat something and immediately my stomach's bothering me or whatever the case is. But that fatigue, that brain fog, that inability to sleep can play a big role there. So, a lot of people are trying to relax in the evening with a glass of wine, but then they're, waking up with night sets at 3 in the morning because that alcohol is hard on your liver and having to process. So that can affect your sleep for sure.
It's such a grounding reminder. I mean, like the way you describe slowing down with practices like yoga, pausing for a deeper breath,
Mhm.
and getting sunshine, spending more time outdoors, and that truly prioritizing sleep, like you said, really shows that how healing doesn't always have to be complex or intense. And it's really powerful to hear that this simple intentional shifts can help women reconnect with their bodies, and move out of that constant push mode. And your approach makes the idea of healing feel much more accessible and compassionate at the same time, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it can be baby steps. They're inexpensive to do. So, a lot of people think I can't afford to be healthy for whatever reason that means, that they can't go to the gym or, they can't buy organic foods and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we can really get nitpicky about those sort of things, but taking a walk outside is free. You just have to kind of prioritize you and find the time where you can fit that in.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. So, Dr. Duffy, thank you for bringing such grounded wisdom to the conversation around burnout and hormone health. Your work reminds women that exhaustion isn't not their destiny, and that real lasting energy comes from honoring the body's design rather than fighting against it. And to everyone listening, let this be your encouragement to seek answers beneath the surface, to trust your intuition, and to reclaim the vitality you deserve. Your energy is your power, and it's absolutely possible to get it back.